Hey, Aubrey. Happy Thursday. Quick question.
Okay.
What are your feelings on puzzles?
Ooh, puzzles. Okay. I feel like I'm going to sound really ancient when I say this, but I really do enjoy puzzles. Like when there is a puzzle around, I would love to do puzzles, but I don't have any around, so maybe I should get some.
I feel like you might think less of me when I say what I'm about to say, which is my wife and I often gift each other a 1,000-piece puzzle for Christmas.
Oh, that's cute.
Okay, Aubrey, what about a puzzle that would make you lots of money if you complete it, but it's a crime if you completed said puzzle?
Oh, well, probably wouldn't do it if it was a crime, but why? Are you offering me one?
Sadly, no. But today we are once again exploring post-quantum cryptography and how governments are planning for the day when a quantum computer breaks modern-day encryption. I'm Michael Bird.
I'm Aubrey Lovell.
And welcome to Technology Now from HPE. We've talked quite a bit about quantum cryptography on this show, including our recent episode, How Do You Create Quantum-Resistant Encryption, which will, of course, be linked to in the show notes. But this is, of course, a known threat, and governments around the world are preparing for so-called Q Day. What do you think Q Day stands for?
Quantum Day.
Yeah. You'll be pleased to know it's not an annual holiday in the UK where we do our British pastime of queuing. It is, of course, the day that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists, with institutions like the US National Institute for Standards and Technology, also known as NIST, and the European Telecommunications Standards Institute.
Well done, Bird. All those names just really roll off the tongue.
Yeah, they are quite a mouthful, but they're also doing good work because these institutions are the ones helping to counter the threat posed by quantum computers. And to tell us more about this, I met up with Ken Rich, Federal CTO at HPE, to find out more about how governments are proactively defending themselves against a potential quantum threat.
But before we get into your conversation with Ken, Michael, are you ready for a whistle-stop tour of the history of quantum computing?
I am so ready for it. Let's go.
I know it's right up your alley, so it's time for Technology Then. Once again, we are jumping back to the 50s, and an old friend of the podcast who seems to appear semi-regularly at this point, Richard Feynman. In 1959, as computer components shrank to microscopic scales, Feynman predicted that the effects of quantum mechanics would start to occur and suggested that designers could harness these phenomena to create more powerful computers. Over the next decade, a few scientists would start to consider the topic seriously, including American physicist Paul Benioff, who published the first ever description of a quantum computer. In 1981, Feynman and Benioff gave talks at the first ever Physics of Computation conference, a conference which is viewed as where widespread interest in quantum computing began. The real threat to modern-day encryption appeared in the mid-90s when, and this is one heck of a title, theoretical computer scientist Peter Shor published an algorithm, Shor's algorithm to be more specific. This algorithm required a quantum computer to run it, which, as far as we know, does not yet exist. But that's not a bad thing. One common method our modern-day computers use to encrypt information uses incredibly large numbers created by multiplying two giant prime numbers together. Multiplying them is easy, but starting with the product and breaking it down is almost impossible, and that's why we use them. But Shor's algorithm would be the blueprint to undo all of that. Now, so far, no one has been able to build a computer capable of running this sort of algorithm. At least no one has admitted to being capable of building a computer like this. More basic ones, though, those that have been around for decades. Way back in 1998, the first quantum computer was built, and it only had 2 qubits, which is the quantum version of a bit. And nowadays, quantum computers allegedly have over 1,000. So big difference there. While the 1998 computer only worked for a few nanoseconds before the system broke down, it did prove the concept and showed that quantum computing was indeed possible.
Possible, probable, and at the forefront of some people's minds, including our guests this week, because it's not just the everyday person at threat from this sort of quantum breakthrough. Even governments are aware and preparing for the threat. So I spoke to Ken Rich, Federal CTO at HPE, to find out more about how governments are preparing for Q Day. And it partially comes down to who is able to make that first quantum computer.
If you look at the type of organizations that will have that type of computer, it's going to be nation states and, maybe very large high-tech companies, but primarily nation states. All nation states have adversaries. So it's kind of a race to see who gets there first, essentially.
And so what in particular worries governments about a quantum computer just suddenly appearing?
So there's a couple of things. The primary one, and actually this is the engine that's driving the change into new cryptographic schemes and things like that, is what they call harvest now, decrypt later, which is a concern that, an adversary may be able to record or collect data today and then at some point in the future be able to decrypt it and find out secrets. But there are other things as well. And you have to understand that governments are there to not only serve themselves, of course, but to serve their constituents. So the governments are actually working towards these new cryptographic schemes so that they can secure their constituents as well, not just their own data.
Aside from harvest now, decrypt later, are there other things which they believe are more of a threat?
There are a couple of what I would say critical threats once the quantum computer is there and it's able to decrypt the data. And that is being able to compromise the trust that we have in certain entities. And then once that trust is broken, the second order effects come in, which is human behavior, for example, is to pull all your money out of the banks that have been compromised, no longer being able to trust international transfers of financial data and things like that.
Okay, so a cryptographically relevant computer appears suddenly. Are we saying that this could destroy all trust in modern day technology overnight?
Well, it could if we don't do anything. But the good news is that we are doing something. So it's a little bit of a controversial topic, to be honest with you, because there's some people that think that this is not going to happen for many years. There's some that think this is not going to happen ever. To be quite honest, if one of these quantum computers did exist, we likely would not know for years.
Yeah.
Right? The adversary is not going to publish that on the internet. So they're going to be trying to use it to their advantage for as long as possible before it becomes public knowledge.
Okay, so what can we do? I mean, do we need a quantum computer to be able to solve this problem? Or can actually, even without a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, we can start to do something?
We are already doing things now. And so if you look at some of the governments, they've already published policy on post-quantum cryptography and moving to the next generation of cryptography. Back in about 2015, I believe, the U.S. government tasked NIST with organizing an effort to find the next generation of quantum-resistant cryptography. And so they've been doing that. And, there's a number of algorithms that they've come up with that they've standardized. And so now there is a path forward. And so companies, high-tech companies like us, we're looking at those, we're integrating those into our products, and, we'll be doing a migration for quite a long time, but, it's already started.
So what can governments and our organizations do without having a quantum computer? What can they do to protect themselves against a cryptographically relevant quantum computer?
Yeah, so we don't need a quantum computer to begin the process. The algorithms themselves are not quantum. They're just quantum resistant, which means that, they use methods inside the encryption that are resistant to being broken by a quantum computer, unlike the current crypto systems that we have. So we don't need a quantum computer to get started. Even in the government, we recommend that, you start developing a team and then you start inventorying your IT infrastructure, prioritize what things that you need to make sure that are safe, and begin to do the migrations and plan the migrations.
And this post-quantum encryption is basically just really, 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 really hard maths to solve versus current encryption, which is just really, really hard maths to solve.
It's just a different kind of encryption. We, in our current crypto systems, we rely on things like factoring into prime components of a large number, which is incredibly difficult with a very large number. And, other things like discrete logarithm algorithms and things like that. They're asymmetric algorithms. So it's easy to go one way, but it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
And so we relied on that since probably in the early 90s with RSA and elliptic curve. The new ones are based on different algorithms, lattice cryptography and things like that. So those are kind of the ones that are going to be quantum resistant, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so the government's role to some extent is to serve its citizens. So what are governments doing to think about this from a citizen perspective? Because as citizens, we have devices that are accessing the internet, that are using current encryption methods to just interact with the world. So are governments also thinking about that?
I think a great example of that is this program that NIST put together to find some new quantum-resistant algorithms. And at the time, there were some. They weren't exactly what we needed, Every cryptographic algorithm has certain attributes that may or may not be good for certain tasks. So they put this together and they worked with industry, they worked with academia, they worked internationally with, anybody across the world could submit an algorithm to be tested and to be approved. They are definitely supporting it. They are also publishing documentation and training guides and things like that so that people that are in an enterprise or in an EDU academia can begin to start that migration process. And, it's not a quick thing. So there's a lot of planning up front and a lot of working with vendors and things like that in order to get a plan. And then the migration will happen. So, I don't expect many of these types of customers to migrate fully until beyond 2030.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's going to be a monumental task.
Yeah. Sounds like it's going to be quite a big job. So is there anything that we as citizens ourselves should be doing or should be thinking about?
The average internet user, no, they're not going to really understand. They don't understand what's in place today.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to really understand the relevance.
And you think it will be a case of like, actually, we don't want them to necessarily be thinking about it. It should just be seamless for them.
It's kind of like your electricity. You take it for granted. And then, and then when it's out, then it's, it's a really big issue. It's kind of like that. They understand that, you get the lock in the browser and so your communication's safe and all that stuff. So it's really up to, I think, the service providers and the cloud, application providers and things like that to, shore up their own thing. And companies that provide the certificates for websites and things like that are already migrating there. And, certain browsers are already supporting the new post-quantum algorithms. So I think for the general public, I think it would be good for them to know. I don't think it would be necessary for them to know.
Yeah. And do you think governments will need to impose some sort of regulation over time to encourage the companies that are manufacturing the devices and software that we're using? Do you think that's going to happen? And if so, when do you think that'll happen? Or do you think this changeover will just happen organically?
It's almost like the carrot and the stick, right? My father always told me when I'd go out at night with my buddies, just don't make the 10 o'clock news. And that's kind of like the industry, right? Nobody wants to be on the news for having a breach related to anything. And so these, the service providers, companies that provide, banking and financial and legal and healthcare and all that stuff, they're going to do their due diligence. So that's kind of the carrot. They want to make sure that they protect their own interests. But then the government will likely in regulated industries, at least here in the U.S., start making requirements for companies to kind of upgrade their infrastructure to support this.
How long do you think we have? Like, what are your current estimates, or what are current estimates on when Q Day would likely be?
I'll give you two answers. The first answer that I always say is it doesn't matter. The industry is migrating now.
Sure.
Okay. And by the time we know this quantum computer exists, it's already going to be way too late. If that quantum computer never exists, it's fine. We've just moved to a better, more secure crypto system.
Yeah.
But when do I think that we're going to see something? I would bet between 2030 and 2035. That's kind of where I'm falling. I've done some analysis of, the rate of qubits being developed, the number of qubits being developed every year keeps growing and growing, and seems like it's on an upward curve.
But I mean, publicly at least, like the development of quantum technologies does seem to be accelerating.
It is.
There seems to be a bit of a who can get there first.
Yeah.
Because I suppose from a commercial perspective, the first person to do it, they get all the spoils of war to some extent.
Yeah, it's very highly competitive. Who's going to get the breakthrough? Who's going to get the patents?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, there's several things that these quantum scientists are working on that actually affect the timeline. So, the number of qubits is one of them. That's all anybody ever talks about. But the error rate of a qubit is another one. And so that affects how many qubits you need to get what's called a stable qubit, which is what you need to actually do the work without a whole bunch of errors. And then the algorithms and the circuitry around it and the interconnects between the qubits, things like that. There's just a lot of stuff going on in that realm.
Are you worried? Or are you excited?
Oh, I'll be retired, so
somebody else's problem.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think it's exciting. I'm waiting for AI and quantum to converge in a true sense. We talk about it theoretically, but yeah, I'm excited about this stuff. And I just gave a talk on this very topic, and my last slide said, "Enjoy the ride. It's going to be fun." And we've never done anything like this before as an industry, so it'll be fun.
it's such a fascinating topic, right? Because we've talked about this before in previous episodes about how things like the pandemic, et cetera, has accelerated innovation. Think about where we are today with AI because of certain events and just how quick that sped up to get us where we are today. And so to hear him say, oh, like we could have this in 10 years. Maybe a few years ago, we'd be like, nah, no way. But now it's very feasible that that could happen and that the technology is getting to a place where this could actually work.
And 2030 to 2035, which is what was Ken's guesstimation. It really isn't that far away.
Absolutely.
We talked in previous episodes and Ken talked about this, like the harvest now, steal now, decrypt later. And that concept of compromising trust in our entities, compromising trust in banks and financial transactions.
It's something that you always see in like TV shows, et cetera. But I think the amount of research and development that's gone into it, it's just making it more real. And to your point, I mean, we talk about these things all the time. You have to fight fire with fire. So the more that we can do and be proactive, if it's a thought, it can happen. And it kind of got me thinking too about hybrid systems, right? Like, obviously quantum computers, they're not meant to replace our traditional computing or classical computers, but they can work alongside them and solve specific problems. So how do you factor that into the equation of what hybrid world does that look like with quantum computing and what we can do together?
I think it'll be quite fascinating. I also really loved what Ken said. I think when I asked him about timescales, and he basically said, I can give you some timescales, here they are. But also the sense of, actually, even if a cryptographically relevant quantum computer never, ever gets made, worst case scenario, we just upgrade our encryption and our cryptography to something that is even harder to break, something that's even more secure. So it's sort of like the downside is that we get better encryption.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be learned from it, and whatever we can do to continue to improve and get ahead of all of these really nefarious and scary, cybersecurity issues, I think is a great win for sure.
It made me think about AI. We were talking about AI for as long as I can think. We've been making podcasts, 5, 10, 15 years. AI has sort of been bubbling under the surface, but it's not really had that sort of public consciousness. You wouldn't have heard it on the news. You wouldn't have heard it on television shows. And then 2022, 2023, it sort of just exploded and came onto the scene and people started caring about it and it was everywhere and in everything. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll ever get that with quantum cryptography?
I think so. And the reason I think that is because we're entering a world where we have this massive flow of free information. Like think about social media, think about AI, right? You can get a full-on report and like end-to-end details about a specific subject with one click of a button. So we've kind of put that on ourselves by creating that technology that anybody can access as information and have that education and kind of learn about that subject.
I think as soon as it starts to impact people's lives, if that is the case, then people will probably start to learn about it quite quickly. Now, Aubrey, Ken lives and breathes post-quantum cryptography, and while we haven't touched on it, he has some really interesting insights on how PQC could affect cryptocurrency.
One of the things, and I mentioned a little bit here, is that, we may not know if an adversary has a quantum computer, but there may be signs. And, as I was kind of noodling this, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, it came to the realization that maybe cryptocurrency would be like a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, kind of an indicator.
Of course, because cryptocurrency is basically solving problems. So if you can solve the problems faster than anyone else.
Yeah, it's actually worse than that because prior to 2012, if you look at the blockchain, they store the public key on the blockchain and it's visible. I did a rabbit hole dive on this, like I said, about 6 months ago, and there are about 6 million Bitcoins out there that have been dormant since 2012. So that means about 600 billion in Bitcoin is out there on the chain for the taking. You wouldn't be able to break the entire blockchain, but the way blockchain works is it's consensus-based, it's a distributed ledger. And so as long as you have the private key that matches the public key, you own the Bitcoin.
Insert mind-blown GIF right there.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of Technology Now for this week. Thank you so much to our guest, Ken Rich. Thank you for the conversation. It was wonderful. And of course, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do let us know, rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to get in contact with us, please do send us an email to technologynow@hpe.com. Subject line, I have a quantum computer for you. And don't forget to subscribe so you can listen first every single week. Technology Now is hosted by Aubrey Lovell and myself, Michael Bird, and this episode was produced by Harry Lampert and Izzy Clark, with production support from Alicia Kempson-Taylor, Becky Bird, Alison Gato, Alyssa Mitchery, and Renee Edwards. Our music was composed by Greg Hooper.
Our social editorial team is Rebecca Wissinger, Judy Ann Goldman, and Jacqueline Green, and our social media designers are Alejandra Garcia and Ambar Maldonado.
Technology Now is a Fresh Air production for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We'll see you at the same time, the same place next week.
Cheers.